Every single day you perform. You rehearse your words before you speak them. You edit your personality depending on who's in the room. You swallow your opinions, reshape your desires, and twist yourself into someone you barely recognize, all because of a terrifying question that runs on repeat in the back of your mind. What will they think of me? You are living your entire life as a response to other people's expectations. And here's the disturbing part: you don't even notice you're doing it anymore. It's become so automatic, so deeply wired into your nervous system, that you mistake this performance for your actual personality. Fear of judgment controls you. Alfred Adler, one of the most underrated psychologists in history, identified this as the root cause of nearly all human suffering. He called it the desperate need to belong, but what he discovered about the solution will fundamentally change how you navigate every relationship, every decision, and every silent moment alone with yourself. Today, we're going to dismantle the invisible prison you've built around your own mind. We'll explore why you became this way, what it's costing you, and most importantly, how to finally stop living for an audience that isn't even paying attention. The invisible cage. Think about the last time you were at a social gathering. Not the conversation you had, but the conversation happening inside your head. Did I laugh too loud? Was that joke stupid? Are they looking at me? Do they think I'm boring? This internal surveillance system runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you built it yourself. Psychologists call this the spotlight effect, a cognitive bias discovered by Thomas Jilovich at Cornell University, proving that we dramatically overestimate how much other people notice and remember about us. We would worry less about what others think of us if we realized how seldom they do. In one famous experiment, students were asked to wear an embarrassing t-shirt into a room full of peers. The students wearing the shirt estimated that nearly half the room noticed. The actual number, less than 25%. You are exhausting yourself performing for an audience that is mostly thinking about themselves. Nobody is watching you as closely as you think they are. But knowing this intellectually doesn't stop the feeling, because this isn't a thinking problem. It's a wiring problem, and it goes back much further than you realize. But to understand where this cage came from, we need to go back to the very beginning of your life. Childhood wiring. Before you could speak, before you could even walk, you learned the most important lesson of your life. Approval equals survival. As an infant, you were completely dependent on your caregivers. If they smiled at you, you were safe. If they frowned, danger. Your nervous system learned to constantly scan for signals of acceptance or rejection, because rejection, to a child's brain, is indistinguishable from death. Your adult brain still runs this ancient survival program. Developmental psychologist John Bowlby called this attachment theory. The way your caregivers responded to you created an internal working model, a blueprint for how you expect all relationships to function. If your parents gave love conditionally, only when you behaved, only when you performed, only when you were convenient, then you learned that love must be earned. Love must be earned, and you've been earning it ever since. Every time you silence your opinion to avoid conflict, every time you say yes when your entire body screams no, every time you abandon your own needs to make someone else comfortable, you're not being kind, you're being strategic. You're running a survival program that made sense when you were 3 years old, but is now destroying your adult life. If this pattern is starting to feel uncomfortably familiar, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring the depths of your psyche with me. Because what comes next explains exactly how this childhood wiring turns into something far more dangerous. The false self. Here's what happens when you spend decades performing for approval. You create what psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott called the false self. The false self is a carefully constructed persona designed to be acceptable to others. It's the version of you that knows exactly what to say at dinner parties. The version that laughs at jokes you don't find funny. The version that pretends to be interested in things you secretly despise. Mask. And the tragedy is this: the false self works. People like it. They validate it. They reward it with praise and inclusion and affection, which means you receive a devastating message over and over again. The real you isn't good enough. Only the performance gets love. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But there's a cost that nobody warns you about. The more successful the false self becomes, the more disconnected you feel from your actual identity. You start to feel empty, hollow, like you're watching your own life through a window. You become a stranger living inside your own body. Depression, anxiety, chronic dissatisfaction, these aren't random. They are signals. Your authentic self is suffocating underneath the weight of a character you never wanted to play. And this leads us to something even more disturbing, the specific mechanism that keeps you trapped in this cycle. Approval addiction. What if I told you that seeking approval activates the same neural pathways as cocaine? Neuroscience research from the University of Michigan found that social acceptance triggers dopamine release in the ventral striatum, the brain's reward center, the same region activated by drugs, gambling, and sugar. This means your need for approval isn't just emotional, it's biochemical. Every like on social media, every compliment, every nod of agreement gives you a tiny hit of dopamine, and like any addiction, tolerance builds. You need more validation to feel the same satisfaction. You need bigger audiences, louder praise, more constant reassurance. Approval is your drug. And withdrawal looks like the crushing anxiety you feel when someone doesn't text back, the spiral of self-doubt after a friend cancels plans, the obsessive replaying of conversations, searching for evidence that you said something wrong. This is not overthinking, this is withdrawal. You are chemically dependent on other people's opinions. The philosopher Epictetus understood this 2,000 years ago. He warned that making your happiness dependent on things outside your control is the fastest path to misery, and other people's opinions are the single most uncontrollable thing in the universe. But what if there was a framework, a psychological tool, that could break this addiction at its root? That's exactly what comes next. Separation of tasks. Alfred Adler proposed an idea so simple it sounds almost too easy. But it is, without exaggeration, the most powerful interpersonal framework ever created. He called it the separation of tasks. Separation. The principle works like this. In any situation, ask yourself, whose task is this? Your task is what you do. How you behave, what you say, the choices you make, the values you live by, that's yours. But how someone reacts to what you do, what they think about your choices, the conclusions they draw about your character, that is entirely and completely their task, not yours. Read that again. Their reaction is their task. Their opinion is their task. Their judgment is their task. You have absolutely zero control over it and zero responsibility for it. The courage to be happy also includes the courage to be disliked. Think about what this means practically. You want to change careers, but your parents will disapprove. Your task, pursue the career that aligns with your values. Their task, process their feelings about your decision. You want to set a boundary with a friend, but they might get upset. Your task, communicate your boundary clearly and respectfully. Their task, manage their emotional response. Your task, their task. This single distinction eliminates nearly every interpersonal conflict you've ever experienced. And speaking of conflict, let me show you exactly where most people get this catastrophically wrong. Entanglement trap. Most people hear about the separation of tasks and immediately misunderstand it. They think it means being cold, being selfish, not caring about anyone, but Adler's insight is far more nuanced than that. The opposite of separation isn't connection, it's entanglement. And entanglement is the silent destroyer of every relationship you've ever had. Entanglement is not love, it is control disguised as caring. Entanglement happens when you cross the boundary between your tasks and someone else's. When you try to control how someone feels about you. When you modify your behavior not because it aligns with your values, but because you're trying to manufacture a specific reaction in another person. Every time you people please, you are manipulating someone's perception of you. That's uncomfortable to hear, but think about it. When you agree with someone you actually disagree with, you're not being polite. You're engineering their approval. When you suppress your needs to avoid someone's discomfort, you're not being selfless. You're controlling the emotional atmosphere. People-pleasing isn't generosity, it's a transaction. You give compliance and you expect approval in return, and when that approval doesn't come, you feel betrayed. But the other person never agreed to this deal. You made it silently, inside your own head. This brings us to our next point, one that will make you question everything about how you define your own identity. Identity theft. Here's the most terrifying consequence of living for other people's approval. You lose access to who you actually are. When you spend years shaping yourself around external expectations, something happens that psychologist Carl Rogers called incongruence, a growing gap between your true self and the self you present to the world. Who are you really? Try this experiment right now. Ask yourself, what do I actually want? Not what your parents want for you, not what society says you should want, not what would impress people at a party. What do you, the person underneath all the performances, genuinely desire? Most people cannot answer this question. And that silence isn't confusion, it's erasure. You've spent so long outsourcing your identity to other people's expectations that you've forgotten what your own voice sounds like. Existential philosopher Soren Kierkegaard described this as the deepest form of despair. The most common form of despair is not being who you are, not failing at your goals, not losing money or status. The deepest despair is arriving at the end of your life and realizing you never lived your own. You lived a composite, a collage assembled from everyone else's opinions of who you should be. You committed identity theft against yourself. But wait, because what comes next changes everything. It's the reason most people stay trapped even after they recognize the pattern. Fear of dislike. You already know you care too much. You've probably known for years, so why can't you stop? Because underneath the approval-seeking, underneath the people-pleasing, underneath every performance, there's a terror so primal it overrides all logic. The fear of being disliked. Dislike. Evolutionary psychologists explain this through our ancestral past. For hundreds of thousands of years, being rejected by your tribe meant death. There was no surviving alone on the savannah. Your brain evolved to treat social rejection as a life-threatening emergency, and it still does. Research from UCLA showed that social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain. Being excluded literally hurts. Your brain processes a harsh look from a stranger the same way it processes a punch to the stomach. Your brain cannot distinguish between social death and actual death. This is why knowing the truth isn't enough. You can intellectually understand that someone's opinion of you is irrelevant and still feel devastated when they disapprove. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. The fear of dislike isn't weakness, it's biology, but biology is not destiny, and Adler gave us the specific practice to override this ancient programming. Let me show you exactly how it works. The daily practice. The separation of tasks isn't something you understand once and suddenly transform, it's a daily practice, a muscle you build through repetition. Here's how to start training it today. Step 1. Catch the entanglement in real time. 1. Notice when you modify behavior for approval. 2. Ask whose task is this feeling. 3. Return focus to your own values. 4. Accept discomfort without reacting. Every time you feel the urge to change your words, soften your opinion, or swallow your truth, pause. Ask, am I doing this because it aligns with my values, or am I doing this to control someone else's reaction? If it's the second one, you've crossed into their task. Step 2. Practice micro-authenticity. Start small. Order what you actually want at a restaurant instead of what sounds sophisticated. Disagree with a minor opinion in a low-stakes conversation. Start small, grow bold. Say no to one thing this week that you would normally say yes to out of guilt. Each micro-authentic choice rewires your neural pathways. You're teaching your brain that authenticity doesn't lead to annihilation. Step 3, and this is the hardest one, let people be disappointed. Their disappointment is their task. Your integrity is yours. This is where freedom lies, and this brings us to the most important realization of all. Authentic freedom. Here's what nobody tells you about authenticity. The first time you practice it, you will feel terrible. You will feel exposed, vulnerable, and convinced that everyone is judging you. That feeling is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're doing something real for the first time. Discomfort is the price of admission to an authentic life. When you start living by the separation of tasks, something remarkable happens. The relationships that were built on your performance will crumble, and the ones that remain, those are the ones built on truth. Those are the people who love you, not the mask you wear. Care about what other people think, and you will always be their prisoner. Adler believed that true freedom is the courage to be disliked, not the desire to be disliked, the courage to accept it as a possible consequence of living honestly. Courage to be disliked. You will lose some people, you will face disapproval. Some will call you selfish, difficult, or cold, and when they do, you will remember their opinion of you is their task. Your task, your only task, is to live in alignment with your values, your desires, and your truth. That is not selfishness. That is the most profound form of self-respect a human being can practice. And it is the beginning of every meaningful relationship you will ever have, because for the first time, people will be connecting with the real you. The fear of being disliked has controlled almost every thought, decision, and relationship in your life. It told you to shrink, to perform, to abandon yourself in exchange for applause that never truly satisfied you. But today, you've learned the antidote. Your only task is what you do, and how others respond is entirely their task. When you try to influence someone else's task, you're not connecting, you're entangling. An entanglement is the root cause of almost every relationship problem you've ever experienced. Your task, their task. Living authentically means defining your actions based on your values, what aligns with who you genuinely are, and what will create a life that actually feels like yours. Then making the conscious, deliberate, terrifying decision to say, this is all I'm going to focus on. Everything else belongs to someone else. To be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best to make you everybody else means to fight the hardest battle any human being can fight. The cage was never locked from the outside. You had the key the entire time. If you made it this far, comment task separated if you're ready to stop performing and start living. Welcome to the Psyche Project. If this shifted something inside you, hit like and subscribe. Understanding yourself is the work of a lifetime. See you in the next video.